The small man in the big room, I want to take you back to a time when nobody believed in me. Not because I had done something wrong, but because I had never done anything impressive. I wasn't special. I wasn't a genius. I wasn't rich. In fact, most of the time I was just invisible. You walk into a room and no one turns their head. You speak and nobody listens. You try and the doors still don't open. I remember standing outside a hotel, offering to guide tourists for free, just to practice English. People would look at me with confusion. Some would smile politely. Others would just walk past as if I was air. But I kept showing up, not because I thought it would make me successful, but because I knew the world didn't owe me anything. I had to earn it, step by step, smile by smile, word by word. Humility, for me, wasn't a strategy. It was a necessity. I didn't have power, so I learned patience. I didn't have talent, so I developed discipline. I didn't have money, so I built relationships. When you're small, you have to think deeply. You have to work harder. And most of all, you have to stay humble. Because that's the only way people start to notice. You see, people think humility is something you'll learn after you succeed. But no, that's too late. Humility is the foundation before anything works. When I applied for jobs and got rejected 30 times, I never blamed the companies. I just thought, maybe I need to learn more. Maybe I need to get better. That's humility. Not thinking less of yourself, but being honest with where you are and committing to grow. I applied to KFC once. 24 people applied. 23 were accepted. I was the only one who didn't get the job. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because what else could I do? Cry? Give up? No. I said, okay, maybe this isn't my door. And I kept knocking elsewhere. Humility taught me not to chase what everyone else was chasing. I didn't want to be like the ones who ignored me. I didn't want to treat others the way I had been treated. So I promised myself, if I ever succeed, I'll never forget how it feels to be ignored. I'll never forget what it's like to be small. When I started my company, I wasn't trying to be a billionaire. I just wanted to give people like me a chance. People who didn't go to fancy universities. People who didn't have rich families. People who were smart, hardworking, and kind, but invisible. I said, well, let's build something that values people, not just resumes. I still remember the first office. Small room, cheap chairs, old computers, but big dreams. And the best part, we had no ego. We were hungry, not arrogant. We didn't pretend to know everything. We asked questions. We made mistakes. We apologized. We helped each other. That's humility. And that's why we survived. As we grew, people started looking at me differently. Interviews, spotlights. Headlines said they're the same. Because I knew the truth. Success doesn't make you smart. It just makes you more visible. And the moment you think you're too important to listen, to learn, or to say sorry, that's the moment you start to fall. I've been in rooms with world leaders, with CEOs of massive companies. And you know what I noticed? The truly great ones, they don't talk the most. They don't boast. They don't act like they're better than you. They ask questions. They remember names. They treat the janitor with the same respect as the president. That's real power. Quiet power. Humble power. When I walked into those rooms, I didn't try to prove I belonged. I just listened, observed, I stayed grounded. I stayed curious. And that made all the difference. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to dominate to lead. Sometimes just being present. Truly present is enough. You know, I failed so many times. I've lost count. Failed at jobs. Failed at pitches. But failure didn't break me. It built. Every time I fell, humility helped me get back up. It whispered, it's okay. You're learning. Keep going. And I did. I never wanted to be the biggest. I just wanted to be better than yesterday. I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to be useful. And the irony is, when you focus on helping others, when you serve without expecting praise, when you lead with humility, that's when people start to follow you. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of respect. There's something powerful about being the smallest in the room. It teaches you to observe before you speak, to respect before you demand, to build before you boast. I learned not to chase applause, but to earn trust. Not to seek credit, but to share. So many people want to be on top. But I'll tell you the secret. The higher you go, the more important it is to stay low in your heart. Because ego is loud, but wisdom is quiet. Arrogance demands, but humility invites. And in the end, the ones who serve, not the ones who shine, build the strongest act. I never forgot where I came from, and I never will. Because the moment you forget the days when no one believed in you is the moment you stop being worthy of leadership. I am still the small man in the big room, and that's exactly why I belong there. Listen loudly, speak softly. When I first started working with people, whether it was in a classroom, a meeting, or a small business setting, I quickly realized something most people overlook. Everyone wants to be heard, but very few people are truly listening. In the early days, I sat in many rooms where people talked non-stop. They talked about ideas, about profits, about competition. Everyone wanted their voice to be the loudest. Everyone wanted to prove how smart they were. But while they were talking, I was doing something else. I was listening. I listened not just with my ears, but with my heart. I paid attention to the small thing, how people hesitated before answering, the ideas they were afraid to share, the frustration in their tone when they felt ignored. I learned more by listening for 5 minutes than others learn by talking for 50. Because when people feel heard, they tell you the truth. They tell you what they're really thinking. And in business, in life, truth is more valuable than noise. I made it a habit to be the last person to speak in every meeting. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted everyone else to speak first. I wanted them to feel safe, to feel that their opinions mattered. You'd be amazed how many good ideas come from the quietest people in the room. If only someone would give them space. Some of the best innovations in my company didn't come from top executives. They came from young interns, from junior developers, from customer service reps who dealt with real problems every day. And because I listened to them, because I created a culture where listening was valued, we found solutions no one else saw. Listening isn't weakness, it's strength. And it takes more courage to stay silent and absorb than it does to interrupt and impress. Most people talk to prove something. I listen to learn something. And that mindset, more than anything else, changed the course of my life. When you listen, you understand people better. You understand what motivates them, what scares them, what drives them. You understand their pain, their passion, their ideas. And when you understand people, you can lead them, not with authority, but with empathy. That's the kind of leadership that lasts. There was a time early in my journey when we were building something new. It was risky. It was chaotic. We had pressure from every side, investors, partners, the market. And in one of those meetings, the room was filled with tension. Everyone had data. People started arguing. Voices got louder. You could feel the stress in the air. I stayed quiet. I looked around the room and saw one of our youngest team members, the newest hire, sitting in the corner, clearly nervous but also clearly thinking. I pointed to him and said, "What do you think?" At first he froze. Then he hesitated. Then slowly he shared an idea. Simple, elegant, effective. The room went quiet. People looked at each other. Then they looked at me, and I smiled. Because the solution didn't come from the loudest voice, it came from the one who had been thinking while everyone else was talking. From that day forward, I made it a rule. We listen before we speak. We understand before we decide. And we create space for everyone, not just the experts, to contribute. That's what humility looks like in leadership. It's not about having all the answers. It's about creating a culture where the best answers can rise, no matter where they come from. Sometimes listening means holding your ego back. There were times when I already knew the answer, but I still asked the question. Not because I needed information, but because I needed people to feel ownership. I needed them to think, to contribute, to feel that their ideas matter. Because if people don't feel heard, they stop caring. And when they stop caring, your company, your team, your vision starts to break down. I've seen leaders who dominate every room, who interrupt, who dismiss, who only hear what they want to hear. And I've watched their companies struggle, not because they didn't have resources, but because they didn't have trust. And trust begins with listening. Even today, when I walk into meetings, I sit with my notebook open. I take notes, I nod, I ask questions. I let others speak. People ask me, "You're the founder. Why are you taking notes like an intern?" And I tell them, because the moment I stop learning, I stop leading. That's humility. That's respect. And that's how you build something that lasts. There's also another side to this. Listening doesn't just help your team. It helps you. Keeps you grounded. It reminds you that no matter how successful you become, you still have room to grow. You still have blind spots. You still don't know everything. I remember once visiting one of our offices in a small city. I sat down with a group of employees and just asked, "What's one thing you wish the leadership understood better?" They were shocked. They didn't expect me to ask that. But once they started talking, they didn't stop. And what they shared helped me fix problems I didn't even know existed. All I did was ask a question and listen. That's the thing about listening. It costs nothing, but it builds everything. It builds trust, because people feel seen. It builds loyalty, because people feel valued. It is that these ideas are no longer stuck in silence. And most importantly, it builds humility, because it reminds you that leadership is not about being the smartest. It's about being the most aware. I never wanted to be a boss who barked orders. I wanted to be a leader who invited ideas, who said, "I don't have all the answers. Let's find them together." So if you ask me what habit shaped my journey the most, what habit helped a rejected, ordinary man become a global entrepreneur? It's this. I listened. I listened when no one else would. I listened when others shouted. I listened even when I thought I knew the answer. Because in the noise of ambition, the quiet voice of humility always guides you right. Speak softly yet, but listen loudly. That is the true voice of leadership. Serve the tea. Even as CEO in the early days, our office didn't have polished furniture or air-conditioned rooms. We didn't have automatic coffee machines or a receptionist in a fancy uniform. We had folding chairs, old computers, and shared desks. But you know what we did have? Each other. A team of people who believed in the vision, even when there was nothing visible to believe in. We worked long hours. Sometimes we skipped meals. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we argued. But there was always one thing I never let go of: serving my people. You see, I never believed that being a leader meant being above others. I never believed that success should create distance. I never saw myself as a boss. I saw myself as part of the team. And I made sure my actions showed that every single day. Many times, I would walk into the office, see a tired team, and the first thing I do was go make tea. Not because someone asked me to, not because it was expected, but because I wanted them to know, I see you, I appreciate you, I am with you. There's something powerful about a leader who serves. It disarms people, it humbles egos, it creates unity. It reminds everyone that no task is too small, and no one is too big. And when your team sees that you're not afraid to roll up your sleeves, they trust you more. They believe in you. They follow you, not out of fear, but out of respect. I still remember one particular day. We had just finished a long sprint preparing for a launch. The team was exhausted. Some had worked through the night. It was early morning, and people were too tired to even speak. So I didn't give a motivational speech. I didn't call for a meeting. I went to the kitchen, made a tray of tea, and quietly walked desk to desk, handing it out. No words, just presence, just service. And you know what? That moment did more for morale than any memo or bonus ever could, because they didn't see a CEO, they saw a teammate. And that mattered more than any strategy. I've always believed that how you treat people when you don't have to, that's who you really are. Anyone can be kind when it's convenient. Anyone can be generous when there's applause. But true humility is revealed in the quiet moments. When no one's watching, awesome. When it doesn't benefit you. When it's just you, a kettle of tea, and a tired team that needs someone to say, "I'm here with you," Even as our company grew, I never stopped doing small things. I greeted people at the door. I helped move furniture before events. I sat with interns, asked about their idea. Not for the sake of optics, but because I never wanted to forget where we came from. I come from a background where hierarchy was very real, where bosses didn't talk to workers, where position was everything. But I saw how that system crushed spirit, killed innovation, and built fear instead of trust. I didn't want that. I wanted to build a place where people felt safe to speak, safe to fail, and safe to grow. And the fastest way to build that culture is by serving. Serving to you is just a symbol. It represented a mindset that no matter how high you climb, your feet must stay on the ground. That real leadership doesn't come from your title. It comes from your touch. There were times I walked into rooms with powerful executives, people who ran billion-dollar firms. And I watched how they treated the people around them. Some were polite, others were cold. But the ones who left a mark were the ones who served without needing to be seen. They asked questions to the waiter. They smiled at the janitor. They didn't act like the room belonged to them. They made others feel like they belonged in the room. That's the kind of leader I wanted to be. You see, when people follow you because they have to, that's management. But when they follow you because they feel valued, that's leadership. And value is not given through emails and speeches. It's given through service. Sometimes people say, but I'm the founder. I've earned the right to sit back. And I say, yes, you've earned the right. But real leaders don't use their rights. They give them up to lift others. That's humility. Even today, when I visit our offices, I still take time to walk the floor. I sit with teams. I listen. I ask if they've eaten. I still pull the teeth. Because I know that success is not about how many people serve you. It's about how many people you serve. And let me tell you something from experience. The deeper your humility, the higher your people will lift you. Not with their hearts. So if you want to lead, start by serving. Pour the tea, not because you have to, but because it reminds you, we rise by lifting others. Celebrate others before yourself in the beginning. I was just thankful to have anyone believe in my vision. We didn't have luxury. We didn't have big investors. We didn't have media attention. What we had was people. People who showed up every day, not for fame or fortune, but for belief. Belief in the mission. Belief in each other. Belief in me. From the very beginning, I made one promise to myself. If we succeed, I will not be the only one who shines. Because I understood something clearly, whatever we would build, I would never build it alone. No one succeeds alone. No one changes the world alone. No one survives the battles, the pressure, the chaos, alone. That's why I made it a rule. We celebrate others. We recognize effort. We shine the spotlight on the people who work behind the scenes. It's very easy for a leader to become the face of everything. The camera follows you. The media quotes you. The awards have your name. But if you're not careful, you begin to think you are the reason, that you are the engine, that you are the light. But I always knew I was just one piece. So when we reached milestones, I didn't stop with I started with we. When we launched products, I didn't talk about my vision. I talked about the engineer who stayed late to fix the last bug. I talked about the designer who hadn't taken a weekend off in a month. I talked about the delivery guy who made sure the first client got their package on time. Because that's where the real story is. There's a young woman in our team, brilliant, quiet, detail-oriented. She once caught a small error in a contract before it was sent out. If she hadn't spoken up, we could have lost millions. No one would have ever known. But I made sure everyone knew, not to embarrass her, but to honor her. Because small actions done with care and excellence deserve to be seen. I've always believed that a company becomes powerful when its people feel valued, not just in salary, but in spirit. Sometimes in meetings, I would stop the whole conversation and say, let's take a moment to thank the people who made last week a success. And one by one, we would name them. From the IT guy who stayed late during server downtime, to the office assistants who cleaned the workspace for an overnight project, to the junior analyst who spotted the missing data in a big presentation. Why? Because when you lift others, you lift the entire organization. When you honor people, they give more than their time. They give their heart. When they feel seen, they become protectors of the mission. But more importantly, they become leaders themselves. In my journey, I've received many awards. Some have been very grand. People clapped, flashlights blinked. Speeches were made. But you know what stays with me? Not the stage, not the trophy. What stays with me is the look in someone's eyes when you walk up to them, shake their hand and say, "Thank you for what you did. Without you, this would not be possible." That moment, private, sincere, real, is more powerful than any public ceremony. We had a celebration once after a tough quarter. Most companies would have canceled the party. But I said, "No, we're going to celebrate our people." And during that evening, we didn't talk about numbers, we told stories. Stories of people helping each other. Stories of sacrifice. Stories of resilience. It was the best celebration we ever had because it wasn't about success. It was about spirit. And that's the kind of culture I always wanted to build. A culture where people feel safe to be great. Where they don't have to compete for credit because they know they'll be recognized. Where leadership is measured not by how much power you hold, but how much praise you give away. I've seen organizations where the boss takes all the credit. I've been in rooms where the leader's name is the only one mentioned, and I watched those teams fall apart, not because they weren't talented, but because they felt invisible. That's the slow death of any great vision, when people stop feeling seen. So I did the opposite. I made recognition a habit. One more time. I made it loud. I made it public. I made it heartfelt. Because people don't forget how you made them feel. They remember forever. And here's the beautiful part. When you celebrate others, you don't lose your light. You multiply. So if you're leading a team or dreaming of building something great, remember this. Your success will never be yours alone. And your legacy will be measured not by what you achieve, but by how many others you lifted along the way. Celebrate others before yourself. That is humility. That is leadership. That is how you build something that lasts. Ask questions. Even if you're the smartest in the room, there's a dangerous moment in every leader's journey. It's the moment people start agreeing with you too quickly. The moment no one challenges your ideas. The moment every room you walk into goes silent, not out of fear. That's the moment when many stop growing. But I knew early on the more people listened to me, the more I needed to start listening to them. The higher I climbed, the more I had to ask questions. You see, I was never afraid of looking foolish. I was only afraid of becoming blind. In the early days, I was the guy asking questions nobody expected. I would sit with our engineers, people with far more technical knowledge than I had, and I'd ask, why are we doing it this way? I'd sit with our youngest team members and ask, what are your friends using these days? What do they care about? I'd ask the receptionist, what do customers complain about the most when they walk in? And you know what? Those questions, simple, honest, humble, revealed more than any expensive consultant ever could. Because leadership isn't about knowing everything. It's about creating space where truth can speak. Even when I had the answer, I still asked the question. Why? Because I wanted to hear how others thought. I wanted to see how they approach problems. I wanted them to think for themselves, not just follow orders. If people come to you only for instructions, you're not building a team, you're building robots. But if they come to you with questions, with new ideas, with solutions, you're building leaders. That starts with your example. I remember walking into a session once, where the entire team had worked for weeks preparing presentations. Everyone was excited to show data, graphs, charts. Everything looked perfect. But I didn't begin by reviewing slides. I asked, what are we missing? What's the one thing we're not seeing? Because we're too focused on success. At first, no one wanted to say something that sounded negative. But then, one person raised their hand and said, we haven't looked at what our competitors are doing differently with younger users. Our growth in that group is slowing. That comment shifted the entire direction of our discussion. Not because I had an answer, but because I created space for others to bring the truth forward. That's what questions do. They open doors that confidence keeps closed. And I want to tell you something very important. The moment you stop asking questions, you start falling behind. Technology changes. Markets shift. People evolve. And if you think you're too important, too successful, or too intelligent to ask a why, how, or what if, you will lose touch. Humility in leadership isn't about pretending you don't know anything. It's about admitting that you don't know everything. I often say this to my team, but don't assume I have the best answer. Assume I want the best answer. And that gives people the freedom to challenge me, to disagree, to speak up. I've been wrong many times. And the only reason I caught those mistakes in time was because someone was brave enough to say, "Are you sure?" And I was humble enough to answer, "Let's take another look." Great leaders don't create echo chambers. They create ecosystems of growth. And ecosystems grow when curiosity flows freely. When every person, no matter their title, has the courage to ask questions. Even now, I speak with students or young entrepreneurs. I don't stand on the stage and lecture. I sit with them and ask, "What's on your mind? What keeps you up at night?" And through those questions, I get to see what the next generation is dreaming about, what they're afraid of, and what they're hoping for. That knowledge is priceless. But it only comes if you're willing to ask. You know, one of the most powerful questions I ever asked wasn't about business. It was about people. I asked my team, what's one thing we can do to make this a better place to work? Some said better tools. Others said more transparency. But one young woman said, I wish we had more chances to share our personal stories, not just our performance. That led us to start something we now call a team circles, where people from different departments meet once a week, not to talk about KPI, but to talk about life, about who they are, where they come from, what matters to them. And because of that one question, our team became more than co-workers. We became family. So don't underestimate the power of a question. It can reveal hidden problems. It can uncover silent fears. It can spark innovation. And most of all, it can build trust. You don't have to be the smartest in the room. You have to be the most curious. Because curiosity keeps your mind young, it keeps your culture alive, and it keeps your leadership rooted in humility. So the next time you walk into a room as a leader, remember this. Don't rush to give answers. Ask better questions. And listen, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Because a humble question can do what a powerful speech never will. It can invite truth. And truth is the most valuable asset any leader can hold. Giving credit where it's due. When people think of success, they often imagine the spotlight being on one person, the founder, the CEO, the face of the company. And yes, in many ways, that's how the world works. But I never believed that success belonged to just one person. It's a shared journey. It's a group effort. And throughout my life, I've always made it a point to give credit where it's due. In the early days of Alibaba, I wasn't the smartest guy in the room. I wasn't the best coder, the best designer, or even the best businessman. But I had something that helped us succeed. I could bring together people who were much smarter than me. People with more technical knowledge, deeper experience, and better solutions. And you know what I did? I didn't stand in their way. I didn't take their ideas and pretend they were mine. I celebrated their ideas. I celebrated their wins. Because I knew, if they shine, we all shine. There's a big misunderstanding in leadership, especially among young entrepreneurs. They think if they praise others too much, they'll lose their own input. That if they're not seen as the source of all good decisions, they'll be forgotten. That's insecurity. Real leadership is the opposite. It's standing at the back when things go right and stepping forward when things go wrong. There were countless times when our team at Alibaba achieved something extraordinary, and I made sure to highlight the people responsible. Whether it was an engineer who solved a complex technical challenge, or a customer service rep who handled a critical issue with kindness and intelligence, I would tell their story. I would mention their name. I would let others see their value. Why? Because acknowledgement is fuel. When people feel seen and appreciated, they do even more. They give their best. They stay loyal. They grow. In one of our team meetings, a young developer had come up with an idea to streamline a feature on our platform. It was a small tweak, something that could have easily gone unnoticed. But the result was significant. It saved time and improved the user experience of thousands of our customers. When I heard about it, I asked him to stand up during the company-wide meeting. I told everyone exactly what he did. I clapped first, and the entire room followed. That moment stayed with him. And that moment stayed with me too. Because that's how you build a culture of mutual respect. I've always told leaders, don't be afraid to lift others up. You don't lose your spotlight by sharing it. In fact, your light gets brighter. And when people know that their effort will be acknowledged, they give you their hearts, not just their hands. You know, some leaders are so obsessed with credit that they damage their own organizations. They take ideas from their teams and pretend they came up with them. They make every win about themselves. And slowly, the team begins to disconnect. People stop contributing their best. Why should they? If the boss will take all the praise anyway, what's the point? That's how talent dies. That's how innovation dries up. That's how companies lose their soul. Giving credit also means being humble enough to say, I didn't do this alone. When we went public with Alibaba, many reporters and analysts focused on me. But I made it very clear. We were standing on the shoulders of 1,000 silent warriors, engineers who coded all night, designers who built user-friendly systems, salespeople who got customers when nobody knew our name. That IPO wasn't Jack Ma's IPO. It was Alibaba's IPO. It was a victory for everyone who believed when the world didn't. Even in my personal life, I practiced. When my friends, my family, or my colleagues teach me something, no matter how small, I make sure to recognize it. Because learning and growing doesn't stop once you're successful. In fact, success should make you more open to learning from others, not less. And sometimes giving credit is about more than words. It's about opportunity. If someone did a great job, don't just say well done. Give them the chance to lead the next project. Let them take ownership. Let them step into the spotlight. That's how you truly show appreciation. I remember one of my managers, a quiet woman who rarely spoke up in meetings. But her reports were always detailed. Her teams always performed well. And her customers were always happy. So one day, I asked her to present in front of the entire executive team. She was shocked. She said, why me? And I said, because you earned it. You're already doing the work. Now let the world see it. That experience changed her, and it changed the way the rest of the team looked at her. That's the power of giving credit. We also need to understand that giving credit doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong. It shows you're secure in who you are. You're not threatened by someone else's success. You're not afraid to stand beside someone who might be more talented in a certain area. That's maturity. That's strength. That's wisdom. When people ask me, what's one leadership habit you think every entrepreneur should adopt? I don't say strategy or innovation or even resilience. I say humility. I say acknowledgement. I say give credit where it's due. Because in the end, no matter how far you go, how big your company becomes, or how much wealth you accumulate, the legacy you leave behind will not just be in your products or profits. It will be in how you treated people along the way. Did you lift them? Did you empower them? Did you make them feel seen? That's the real measure of leadership. That's the true power of humility. And that's how you move beyond just being a billionaire to becoming someone worth following. Give more than you take. I want to talk to you about something that goes against what many people believe success is built on. You see, so many are taught that in business, in life, in leadership, you have to take. You have to take opportunities. Take the best deals. Take the credit. Take the spotlight. That the more you take, the more successful you will be. But in my life, I've learned that the real power, the real lasting legacy, comes from giving more than you take. When I started Alibaba, I wasn't the smartest person in the room. I wasn't the richest. I didn't have powerful investors or fancy degrees from the West. What I had was a deep belief that business could serve people, not just profit from people. And so from the very beginning, I told my team, we are going to solve problems. We are going to make it easier for small businesses. We are going to give them a voice in a world that ignores them. That's what we did. You see, giving doesn't always mean money. It means giving your time, your trust, your encouragement, your belief in someone who hasn't yet learned how to believe in themselves. I would meet young entrepreneurs who had nothing, no money, no connections. But I would listen to them. I would tell them, your idea matters. You matter. Sometimes that's all a person needs to hear. That's all I needed when I was starting out. Fuck, someone to believe in me. When I traveled around China, visiting small towns and big cities, I saw people who had ambition, but no access, passion, but no platforms. They were hustling every day, trying to sell their products or build their services, but no one gave them a chance. Big companies ignored them. Banks rejected them. The system was not built for them. But I saw them. I remembered what it felt like to be invisible. I remembered the pain of rejection. So I said, let's build something that helps these people win. That's what Alibaba became. The more we gave, the more trust, the more tools, the more attention, the more we grew. It was not about taking over markets. It was about helping others stand. And when they stood, we stood taller. That's a lesson I wish more people understood. Real growth is shared. If you rise alone, you fall alone. But if you rise together, no one can push you down. Even inside our company, I tried to lead this way. But I didn't want to be the boss who took all the credit. I wanted to be the leader who gave others the spotlight. When my team succeeded, I celebrated them. When they failed, I stood in front of them and took the blame. That's how you build loyalty. That's how you build respect. Not by fear, but by generosity. I gave chances to people who failed. I gave responsibility to those who doubted themselves. And I watched them grow into giants. That's the beauty of giving. It multiplies. The more you give, the more you create. I have seen this truth again and again in my life. Even today, I try to live simply. I try not to let wealth or status control me. I try to remember the kid I was, who dreamed big, who failed a lot, who was rejected many times, but who never gave up, and who always tried to give something back. Whether it's education, or mentoring, or simply listening, I believe it's our duty to give, especially when we have more than enough. I know the world can seem competitive, like a race where only the strongest survive. But I want to tell you this, the most successful people I've met, the ones who are respected, remembered, and truly loved, are not the ones who took the most. They are the ones who gave the most. They are the ones who lifted others while climbing, who created space at the table instead of keeping it all to themselves. So if you want to be more than just rich, if you want to be significant, then learn to give. Give kindness. Give wisdom. Give your hand to someone who's still learning how to walk. And I promise you, when you look back on your life, it won't be the money that defines you. It will be the moments you gave something and changed someone's life. That is how I try to live. Not just as a businessman, but as a human being. And I hope you will too. You know, people often ask me, what's the secret, Jack? What's the real formula that helped you rise from a teacher earning a few dollars a month to the founder of one of the biggest e-commerce companies in the world? And I smile. Not because I have some magic formula. Not because the answer is much simpler than they expect. It was never just about the business models, the market timing, or the competition. It was always about the mindset. It was always about humility. No, doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It means you understand your position in the bigger picture. It means you're aware that you are just a piece in a much larger puzzle, and that no matter how successful you become, you can still listen, and you can still listen, and you can still serve. In the early days, when I failed the college entrance exam twice, when I was rejected from dozens of jobs, including KFC, and when investors laughed at my English and my dreams, I had every reason to become bitter. But I didn't. I chose to become better. I learned to embrace humility not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Every time I walked into a room full of investors, I didn't pretend to know everything. In fact, I often told them, I don't understand technology. I'm not a programmer. I'm just a teacher with a dream. And do you know what happened? People connected with that honesty. People trusted that humility. Because pretending to be what you're not may win you a few moments, but being real, that wins hearts, and hearts build legacies. When I started Alibaba, with my friends in a small apartment, we didn't have money, we didn't have power, and we didn't have connections. What we had was belief. Belief in ourselves, belief in each other, belief in something bigger than all of us. And that belief was grounded in the understanding that we didn't have all the answers. We listened, we adjusted. That's humility in action. I learned to never let success go to my head. Even when Alibaba went puke, even when we raised billions, I reminded myself every day, money does not make you smarter. Power does not make you right. Influence does not make you immune to mistakes. The moment you believe you are above learning, above growing, above serving, that is the moment your downfall begins. Humility has been my protection. It has protected me from arrogance. It has protected me from false pride. It has protected me from isolation. Because when you think you're the smartest in the room, you stop listening. When you stop listening, you stop growing. And when you stop growing, your success starts decaying. To be humble is to invite feedback. To be humble is to value people at every level. To be humble is to celebrate your team when you win and take responsibility when you fail. That is how you earn loyalty. That is how you build culture. That is how you lead with impact. You don't need to be a billionaire to practice humility. You don't need a fancy title or a big office or a large following. Humility is not about your net worth. It's about your mindset. It's about how you treat the person who can do nothing for you. It's about how you react when no one is watching. It's about the little decisions you make every day to lift others up instead of putting yourself above them. I remember the days when I would take long walks alone, wondering if my dreams were foolish. I questioned myself. I doubted. But in those quiet moments, I found clarity. I realized that my role was not to become the richest man in China. My role was to serve, to empower small businesses, to give opportunities to the underdogs, to show the world that someone like me, someone who failed many times, could rise again and again if only he stayed humble. And now, looking back at the journey, through the storms, the laughter, the criticism, the praise, I see clearly that humility was the constant, not just a strategy, but a way of living, a way of building trust, a way of connecting with the world, not from a place of superiority, but from a place of shared humanity. So if you ask me what truly lies beyond billionaires, what sets apart those who inspire from those who merely accumulate, my answer is this: it's humility. The quiet power to keep learning when you're admired, the gentle strength to serve when you're praised, the courage to say, I don't know, even when the world expects you to know everything. And I will leave you with this: no matter how high you rise, always keep your feet on the ground. No matter how far you go, always remember where you started. And no matter how much you achieve, always keep the humility to listen, to grow, and to serve. Because in the end, people won't remember you for your net worth. They'll remember you for your heart.